You're watching The New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show. Well, it's a Wednesday afternoon in Bilbao, Spain, and I'm here with Stefano Maffuli. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Did I do okay?
Hey, you did all right.
All right. Now, Stefano is with the Open Source Initiative, and the Open Source Initiative has a long history with open source.
Well, yeah, we coined the term,
Which was when?
25 years ago exactly. 25 years and a few months. It was February 1998.
So, and there's a story behind that, why you coined the term, and it came out of the free open source movement and the need for more collaboration, and that led to then, how you could actually define your technology as open source, and you had to meet some criteria, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it came out of after 15 years of history of the free software movement and the free software definition, the GNU Manifesto, the GNU project, all the elements that were already there, like social norms and licenses being distributed. And also what was happening at the time was the commercialization of GNU and the operating system with Linux on top. So there needed to be a little bit of a new terminology, new frames of references so that businesses could have conversations without having the encumbrance of the word free.
So we've gone from GNU to GPT.
I would say so. I guess.
And so, with GPT and LLMs and generative AI, it's really not about just the code.
Indeed,
it's not just about the data.
Not even, yeah.
And so what is it?
It's a lot of complexity, a lot of new things. It really reminds me a lot of the early days in the 70s when software started to come out of the laboratories, and it was a new artifact, a new creation of the human creativity, the creative minds, right? And we needed to think about what to do with this thing. The software, the source code, the binary code. Do we want to apply copyright? Do we want to apply patent law? Do we want to do a whole new thing? And slowly it started to consolidate, the whole social norms started to consolidate behind using copyright. We are at the same sort of stage in history where we have these large language models, these new transformers that require a lot of data that gets fed into a machine, creates a model with weights and parameters. All these new parameters are new. They don't fully squarely fit into the copyright framework because they're not technically a creation of the human mind. They're the result of an elaboration. Some scholars, some legal experts think that they're not covered by copyright even, but there is a really big complexity down there.
So we don't have 20 years to come up with a new definition.
Yep.
But what do we have?
What we do have is a lot of experience in creating definitions and listening to communities. Like, the interesting thing about the open source definition is that it didn't come out of the vacuum, right? It was already in place, actually. The Debian Free Software Guidelines were the result of the consultation from the Debian community, and those are the ones that became the free software, the open source definition. We do have a way, and we do have this practice of putting together the most brilliant minds that are thinking about the problem of what open means in the AI systems, in this AI space, and that's what we're doing. We put together a bunch of people.
What does open mean now to you?
So what we want to do with AI is to enable, to find a definition, to find this common understanding of what we want to have in order to replicate the commercial success of open source for software. So AI enabled, open source definition enabled developers to be autonomous, independent, and have ultimately self-sovereignty on their technological choices, thus enable also control, or if you want, democratic access to digital means for society as a whole, and a very successful commercial business opportunities for collaboration, for example, at fast innovation. We want to enable the same things within AI. So that's what we're looking for, convergence of the minds, so that we can have a definition that can help the space of AI the same way that software has been helped.
So what are some of the hints?
Some of the hints are that for sure there is something to be said about the dependency between data and models. It's a very, very complex scenario where it's not squarely resolved by looking at copyright law. It's not as simple as that. When we look at data, there is privacy law that kind of gets in the way. Not only privacy law, there is labor law. There is also a very general understanding within the developers communities of the AI systems that they have a very strong responsibility towards the society for the abuse of AI systems. Like GPT, all of a sudden something like ChatGPT getting out of control and creating or enabling spamming the public with fake messages and influencing the minds of people. Like, this is triggering a lot of regulation also already.
Right.
Way before software was regulated.
Is it even open source?
ChatGPT?
Well, I mean, what we're talking about. I mean, because it's, I get the sense sometimes we're trying to like create something new out of something that we've already developed, and sometimes it needs its own thing entirely, its own.
It is a new thing. It's there. So in the AI systems, I think that we have a completely new thing.
Like turning an online site, like making an online site look like a magazine. Remember those days?
Oh,
like you would like flip through the magazine.
Flipping virtual
but it
pages.
really requires its own
new language.
Yeah.
And indeed, that's what we're seeing. That's what I'm seeing with this group that I put together of more than 50 people from very different side of society. That's what I'm seeing. Completely different frameworks are necessary, new approaches, new way of thinking.
So who's in this group?
We have people coming from the open world, and not open source, not just open source like Mozilla Foundation, but also from the open knowledge, open science, like Creative Commons and Internet Archive and the Open Knowledge Foundation. Groups from the science groups like NumPy, NumFocus, and Python Software Foundation. The groups that develop software that is more targeted to AI systems. There are large corporations, Meta, Google, Facebook, GitHub, Microsoft. I mean, I won't forget all of them. We're also engaging with the venture capital early on. Yeah, because
why?
Because I want to avoid the issue of cloud business models being ignored by the open source world. So I think that there is a transformative change into these systems that we need to get into the account their concerns very early on. But also we have Debian and developers from the academia side, ethicists, expert in policymakers also.
Mm-hmm. So where are you in the process then?
We're getting started. We actually started in June with a very fast, very quick roadmap. There is a lot of pressure. Like the United Nations is driving a lot of the urgency. The United Nations Digital Public Goods Alliance is reviewing their digital public good definition, and it's including AI into their space. They want to have a framework of reference so that they can finance and stimulate economies locally, but have a framework that is respectful of openness in general. They've used the open source definition as a guideline for their first edition of the digital public goods. And in fact, open source software is by default is part of the digital public goods. They want to have something similar for AI. So we're helping them before the end of the year to reach a sort of early conclusion about what open means or what good is for the sustainable development goals. And then after that, we're going to be concluding, taking that work and over the next year in 2024 so that it can be validated. And by the end of 2024, I hope to have a version 1 of the open source definition for AI that can be adopted and it can be widely referenced.
So, what have you established so far?
So far, what we're trying to establish is the name of the definition. Believe it or not, it's complicated. Like open source AI is the term that you hear quite a lot being referenced, so we kind of cannot escape it. But there was resistance at the beginning for using the term source referred to AI because there is no source, or at least it's not the same source, so it could be confusing. So that's one of the challenges. The other very big one that we'll try to find an answer for next month in All Things Open. We have a meeting scheduled. At All Things Open, we hope to have a conversation about the dependency between data that goes into feeding a model, training a model. Like how tightly coupled do we need those to be for open source AI to exist, right? So, because if you go back to the analogy that I was mentioning before, source code to binary code, right? With software, regular software, humans write the source code and then they feed that into a compiler. The compiler spits out binary code that can be run by the processor. It cannot be edited, modified, transformed by humans anymore, or at least it's very, very complicated and not effective. With AI systems, there is you can think of the same dependency, right? Humans have assembled a source of data, a group, a quantity of data, put into a data set. Then they feed it into a machine. The machine trains the model and spits out weights and parameters. So those weights and parameters now are somewhat a descendant, or from the original data set. The problem is that you can separate the data, you can ignore it from then on, you can modify, retrain, repurpose that model, those weights, without the original data. It's a slightly different technically type of dependency.
So what's the role of transparency? For example, we've seen these models emerge, ChatGPT in particular, that is somewhat of a black box.
Correct. Yeah, it's obscure.
Are we looking for more transparency with those models? And that almost kind of relates to the transparency of the algorithm.
It's correct. Transparency is definitely one of the aspects that open source has as a value, right? You can see the source code, you can trust it, more eyes brings the bugs down and all those funny memes, right? The same thing should be happening for AI. We can expect that having a transparency layer on top of your training data sets will help understanding the behavior of the model itself and kind of explain it, because right now technically there isn't much of a clear understanding of the inner workings of a large model.
Yeah.
So we know that they prompted with some questions, they respond with the LLM responds with an answer, but we don't know exactly why and how to modify it or how to fix it if it's giving consistently the wrong answer, right? So having access to the full training data set or having transparency is definitely a value in there. Now, the funny thing, the consequence of that transparency, though, it's something worth pointing out, is that if you release a lot of this information, then you may enter into legal concerns. Like the groups that have trained their models openly, they have revealed that they have used copyrighted material for their training. And now they're being sued or they're receiving the MCA takedown requests constantly. The groups that have not disclosed that information, they are kind of shielded by, because they say, yeah, no, we're not going to tell you what's in here. Therefore, it's up to the Getty Images of the world to sue and go to court and demonstrate to a judge that indeed OpenAI or what have you, with the opaque large language models, they actually have indeed used copyrighted material. So
you can open it up and make it fully available, but then you open yourself also up to takedowns.
Yep.
But if you keep it behind closed doors, they don't know what you've used, and so you don't have that threat of takedown.
Yeah, so I think that we need to think about the transparency as a value, and we need to really push for policies so that changes, so that we do protect the ones who are transparent.
So one of the aspects of open source is how much it's served as the framework for building out communities. And I'm wondering how you think about community and those frameworks you establish for this new definition.
Okay, well, when it comes to creating communities around AI development, the one thing that I realized early on is that we're really in a completely new ballpark when it comes to developing AI systems, right? With software, you can do it with a laptop, cheap laptop in your basement with an internet connection, right? And a text editor. Like that was the beginning of a lot of the open source projects. With AI, you need access to large clusters made of GPUs that are extremely expensive. And the stacks are still extremely proprietary. And the assembly of large quantity of data is also full of obstacles from legal and, as I was saying, policies that make it really hard. So communities are forming, they do exist. There are a couple of groups, especially Luther AI and Lion, that are doing very interesting work. They started kind of like a joke during the pandemic.
Start as a what?
As a joke during the pandemic, a bunch of developers forced being at home, researchers not being able to go to school or teach, and they saw GPT-3 being released, and they saw their papers like, I wonder how long it will take to replicate this. So they assembled the brilliant minds. They put together some data without really thinking about the consequences. And they found sponsors and donors who gave them access to clusters of GPUs. They set up their clusters, they helped them set up their clusters, and they trained, models that have capabilities that are comparable, or, they're pretty good, right? So they started the open source AI, if you want, that way.
So how does the community interact? Is it around code?
They interact around scientific publications. So they are scientists in the end. So they publish papers. They have a Discord channel. They have websites, mailing lists. A little bit like open source communities have been coalescing around IRC in the early days. They use Discord quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking in community development, you have version control, and you have pull requests and all the rest. And I'm curious what that looks like in this new world.
There is a combination of all of that thing, because there is not just code. There are the assembling the data set requires. They work a lot like scientists. So I've seen them a little bit from the distance. So they have worked on that, assembling the pile. They call it one of the largest publicly available data sets of text-based. It's very large.
It's like 1973 in some ways.
In some ways,
that's probably the way it was then, too.
Oh,
so we don't have any really idea what the algorithm development will be, what the components will be that go into the making of an LLM, for instance?
Well, Eluther AI is quite public about what they've done.
Sure.
Right, so they have
But
a lot
the
of scientific
practices are
paper.
very green.
The practices are sophisticated and complex. They don't
Right.
they don't look at all like
I'm just
anything
thinking
I've
of
seen
like,
before.
the millions of developers who work with code every day.
Mm-hmm.
What will it look like when we have, millions of developers working on open source projects related to AI?
Well, they're not millions.
What?
They're not millions.
Yeah.
They're
What
many
will it
less.
look like?
A lot less. There is an issue of knowledge. Look, so if you think about
Will it be the community for the AI itself? I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, yes, it's.
will the AI need its own community?
I'm assuming it will develop that
You must
way.
be having to ask these questions yourself, because that's what AI is starting to do. It's like starting to help itself, right?
Oh, you mean the machine
Yeah.
feeding itself? I don't think we're anywhere close, at least from what the experts tell me.
Well, with like, you could have a model, for instance, where you have a pre-trained model.
Mm-hmm.
You keep feeding it more information to to help it kind of like, deepen its context.
So from what I hear, from what the experts tell me, we're very, very far away from having something that functions that way. So a model that is capable of improving itself and keep on improving itself. Now there is something that they call synthetic data, where in areas where there is a strong either lack of data or strong privacy issues, like medical data, models are being trained after they are trained to create data that looks plausibly good or real, and fed into that. But we're really far away from us.
Yeah, we're getting off track a bit. So just in conclusion, what are the next steps? You're going to meet who's meeting at All Things Open?
So at All Things Open, we're meeting experts who are going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina. There's going to be a selection of this group that have assembled, and we're going to have a facilitator in the room working with us to drive the conversation and try to set try to converge towards agreements.
So what's the first major milestone you're trying to reach?
Writing a preamble for this definition, because I think that's the first step. We're going to have to write the very basic principles that we want to have agreed upon and imagine the results.
When will you have that?
When? I'm hoping that we'll have it by the end of the year. So
Okay.
right after the All Things Open conversation.
So that'll kind of like just state the principles, and then you'll start drilling into the principles after that?
I'm assuming that's how it's going to go.
Any
we
emerging
might be
principles?
lucky.
So what are some of the top 3 principles?
We're probably going to be talking about the fact that we want to stimulate innovation. We want to protect society from abuses.
Okay.
We do want to have.
Those are the principles you're looking
Yeah.
at. Okay.
Yeah.
And that aligns with what the UN is doing. Then too.
Right. It could be, maybe as simple as reviewing the GNU Manifesto and seeing what we can take from there that is still valid to the AI system. If you think about the golden rule of the GNU Manifesto is if I like a piece of software, I want to be able to share it with the other people who might find
Right.
it useful. So if you substitute the word software and say AI system, probably it shouldn't be that hard to say,
Right.
yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to be able to share these AI systems with others who like it. From there, the problem will become to define AI system, which is probably going to be made of data. So the data, the model architecture, the learnings, meaning the parameters and weights and the biases, the software that you use to train the data to inform the model itself, and that's it.
Well, Stefano, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you for the opportunity.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope
to see you soon.